All right, today we are factoring by grouping. Tomorrow you'll have a mini quiz of 6-5 and 6-6. Don't ask me a question about it. It will be short. We will be learning a lesson. Today is the last form of factoring. Tomorrow we're putting it all together. 6-7 mixes all the different kinds of factoring together. So today what we are doing is when we have a polynomial made up of 4 or more terms, we will use factor by grouping. So the purpose of today's lesson, the objective, is to when given 4 or more terms in the polynomial, factor it by grouping. We started out learning about how to factor out just a monomial. We called it GCF, greatest common factor. It's also a greatest monomial factor. Monomial means one term. So what do these two terms have in common? X. So I can factor out the monomial x. I pull out an x and we're left with what? So notice I only pulled out one x. I'm dividing it out of both terms, but I only write it down once. Okay, just like we did that, today we're going to factor out, so we have a monomial times a binomial factor. Okay, on the next one, what common factor? Look, here's a term and here's a term.
1 plus 5.
The quantity, the binomial, the common factor they have happens to be a binomial y plus 5. So we can pull a y plus 5 out. We can divide it out. And how many times am I writing it? One time. And then we put everything else that's left in the other parenthesis. Okay? I divided a y plus 5 out. What was left is the a in the first one and the positive b in the second one. Okay? Okay? Here, in this case, we have a binomial factor times a binomial factor. Pause the recording if you want to take notes. Okay, so I'm having a question is why is it just y plus 5 and not y plus 5 squared? When I'm pulling out an x here, we don't write x squared here. We're just taking one common factor because when I multiply it back, it's going to get multiplied times this and it's going to get multiplied times this when I double distribute back. Okay? All right, so now this is what we're actually going to do. Write down this phrase. This is called, in the left-hand side, I want you to write factor by grouping. Factor by grouping. Okay, and you can put comments to the right of it. Step 1, you're going to group. Okay. Group them into 2 pairs. Okay. Now, in the first group, do we have a common factor?
Yes.
AM plus 4A. Shivam, which is the common factor there? A. Okay, and then what's left in there? M plus 4, right? In the second group, is there a common factor? David in the back. What's the common factor? David N?
Yeah.
What is it?
3.
Positive 3. I want the sign. And what's left?
M plus 4.
M plus 4. Okay? Now, what can we factor out? What's the common term, Mark?
M plus 4.
I can take out an m plus 4. And then I'm left with everything else goes into the other binomial, a plus 3. That is factor by grouping. Okay, questions?
Is that it?
Yeah.
That's it?
Well, of course, there's going to be some complications. All right, can I go?
Wait, is this on the...
Can I? Yes. Can I go? Okay. I like to group mine first. Like, they don't write the parentheses on it, and I do. Okay, so what's the common factor for number 1? Cameron?
Y plus 2.
So when I divide it out, because this is one term. Remember, our terms change when we see a plus or minus, but this is connected by multiplication. Right here, that's one term. Okay, so we can pull out the binomial factor of y plus 3, and what's left? What's left? Okay, Ashley?
X plus K.
Yep, x plus k. Okay, you try the next couple. Go. Pause the recording. I'm going to put the answer up. Check your answers for number 2. How about number 3? Have you guys checked? Have you finished that?
Yes.
Let's check our answers. That should be t minus 4 times 5 minus x. How about number 4? Okay, I'm going to start with number 4. Let's start by grouping it first. That's the only thing that's different. There we go. Now we actually have to find the common factors. Devin, what's the first one?
The common factor for the first one is A,
And what's left?
P minus 3.
Okay. Carter, what's the second one? What's the common factor?
Common factor is B.
Positive b. And what's left, Carter?
P minus 3.
And so we finish it, Madison, and it becomes? Well, what common factor do both terms have?
P minus 3.
P minus 3. And what's left?
A plus B.
A plus b. Try the next one. Pause it, and you guys try the next one on your own. Okay, Rami, start me off. Step 1.
So there's an A in both terms. So
But before we even do that, what do I have to do? We have to group it. That's the first step.
okay.
Okay, and so what do you want me to pull out first?
A
And what's left?
times quantity of B minus 1.
B minus 1. When you divide A by A, you're left with a 1.
And then plus. And then there's a C in
What are you're factoring out a positive C?
Yeah, and then times the quantity of B minus 1. And then now you have like 2
B minus 1s,
times A plus C.
the quantity of A plus C. Okay, questions? All right, let's move on. Oops. Oops, I'm trying to do this. Here we go. Okay, sometimes the terms might not be in order. Look what happens. When I group this, I have a x that I can pull out, and I'm left with 3 plus a. Look at the next one. Is there anything to pull out? We could potentially, if it looks like there's nothing, you can say positive 1. But then look what I'm left with. X squared plus 3a. And these have to be the same in order for you to factor out that binomial. So that doesn't work. So what we do is we move them around. We have to move them around. Okay, so I'm going to actually reword it, move them around. Okay? Doesn't matter how you do it. There's no one way. Okay? But I'm going to move this 3x and x squared together, and I'll put the greater amount of x's first. So now I'm going to try that, and I get an x, and what's left?
Wait, how about the 8x?
Hold on. There's no 8x.
I mean the AX. Can't you factor that with the X?
Over here, there was no way to factor that out,
No, I'm
right?
just gonna say like you could make like a trinomial thing.
Nope. We need to put them in pairs. Okay, so in the first one, there's an x in common, and what's left?
X plus 3.
Okay, x plus 3. In the second one, what can I pull out? Positive a, and what's left?
X plus 3.
So then we have our x plus 3 times
X plus A.
everything that's left, x plus a. Yes?
At the beginning, couldn't you just like find the greatest common factor? Because there's like a lot of factors in all of them.
But there's no common factor in all of them. There is no greatest common factor. There's no x in everything. There's no a in everything. There's no 3 in everything. It has to be in all parts. So that's why we factor it by grouping. We put them in groups and then pull out common factors. So hopefully we can find a common binomial in both.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
And then it's there.
So I'm going to go on from this, the order. I'm not going to spend much more time on this, but you can notice, okay, when I move this around, notice right away, I moved I switched the 2x, I moved it here and moved the 6 over, right? Do you understand? Like we switched the 6 and the 3n, right? Or actually the 6 moved where the 3n is. The 3n moved over. It doesn't matter. Okay? But look at it compared to here. So in this case, when I moved the 6 with the 3n, okay, this is what I got. But here I'm reorganizing it a different way. Okay? The difference is what happens where your common binomial here is n plus 2. When you rearrange it in a different way, your common binomial is n plus 3. Do you understand? So it doesn't matter what the order is. Just rearrange it. Play with them.
So you can pick whichever one.
Yeah, well, you won't know. You might not do the same thing as Cameron. You're going to just move them around and see if you can find some common factors. Like, let's try, I think I'm going to do 5. I'm going to do the x cubed and the minus 5x squared. And then I'm going to put the other one plus 2x, the one with more x's, minus 10, and I'm going to factor it that way. Right? I just pick 2 that went together. It doesn't matter what 2. Just try it in a different order. So then I get an x squared, and I'm left with x minus 5. I'm going to pull out a positive 2, and I'm left with x minus 5. So we get x squared plus 2 and x minus 5. Does that make sense? And you can see there's 2 different ways that they organize these. Okay? The difference is, yes, Alex.
How do you know what to reorder?
Doesn't matter, just play with it. Try any reorder. I chose x cubed and x squared to put them together. See, I did it like this. Do you understand? But look, they're doing this. There's more than one way to do it. Okay?
Oh, so just basically find a way besides the number. that's
Yeah,
next
the way that they did it, try moving the terms around with their sign. Okay? It works, believe me. Okay, now let's talk about opposites. You've been dying to factor out a negative. Well, here we come, people. Here it comes. Okay, what's the opposite of x? Good. What's the opposite? No, that's reciprocal. Opposite is opposite sign. Okay? What's the opposite of 8? What's the opposite of x plus 3? Negative x, negative 3, right? What's the opposite of a minus b?
Negative x plus b.
Negative a plus b. Okay? But that looks funky. Negative a plus b. It looks, can you please listen to me? It looks funky starting with the lead negative. So isn't this the same value? Okay, so if I want to do the opposite of a minus b, what would it be? B minus a. Do you understand? Both are opposite signs. Okay? What's the opposite of c minus 5? 5 minus c. I just want to hear 5 minus c. Okay, what's the opposite of 5y squared minus 4? Okay, what's the opposite of 2n minus 3? Okay, so now we're asking, it's asking us to rewrite each product each factor as a product of -1 and the opposite. So this is equal to -1 times x.
No, times negative x, right?
No, times its opposite.
Oh.
-1 times the opposite would be times -b equals b.
So you
-1 times the opposite, a plus b, right?
We just write negative.
Okay. What would the next one be?
also you don't simplify.
What would the next one be? Cameron?
-1 times negative x equals 4.
Okay, but if I want to do the opposite,
Oh wait,
what's the opposite of it? We're going to flip it.
Yeah.
I want you to just write it as a flip.
-1 minus.
Alex?
Example number 5.
Yes.
So it will be -1 times 3 minus 2n.
Perfect. So if I need to flip terms around to make it match with the other group, meaning both signs have to be opposite, not change both to negative. Okay, Carter, what's the next one?
The next one would be -1 times x squared minus 7. 7 minus x squared.
Times the opposite. Keep going, Carter. Next one.
-1 times p minus 2.
Good. Next one. Let's go with Dakota.
-1 times 5k squared plus 6 minus
Opposite sign. Each term becomes opposite sign. Okay? Shh. All right. So now we're going to get to use it. Ready?
Okay.
So let's write the first problem. We're going to group it. Okay? In the first group, what can we factor out? We don't use a -1 to begin. I can factor out an x, and then I'm left with b minus 9. Okay? Now, if I factor out a 2, positive 2, then I'm left with 9 minus b. Do you see how that's opposite? So how could I change that so it flips around? Instead of positive 2, what can I do?
-2.
Negative 2 flips it so it becomes b minus 9. Do you understand?
But why would you want that?
Because now I can factor out a common binomial. Okay? I want it to match. If it's the opposite of the other binomial, then you've got to factor that out. So now I've got, so when we factor out the -2, right? It makes the 18 divided by -2 is -9. -2b divided by -2 is just a positive b. Now I can pull out my factor of b minus 9, and I'm left with x minus 2. Okay, try the next one. Go. Pause the recording. Go. Matthew.
First you group,
And what do I factor out?
for the first one it's k,
And what's left?
x
Squared.
squared minus 5.
Good. And then in the second one, what am I factoring out?
Also 3,
What kind of 3?
-3,
-3. When I divide 15 by -3, what do I have?
5 minus x,
No. When I divide
-5.
-5, and when I divide this term by -3, what do we have?
X squared.
X squared. Okay. Now what, Matthew?
And then now you do
Did you get this? Because you were reading 5 minus.
Well, I put x squared minus 5.
Okay. Okay, so what do we have?
X squared minus 5
Times the quantity.
of k minus 3.
You get the idea?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go on to 2 more. This is where we put it all together. Okay, step 1, what do? We're Gonna see this all over here, so what do, Cameron?
Greatest common factor.
Which is
2.
2. Okay? Now, I'm gonna factor by grouping inside here. So when you have multiple parentheses, usually the outer ones, we're gonna finish these two. Okay, we're gonna finish these two problems, so please don't pack up because I'm recording. So I have to bring this 2 down. Okay, but what can we pull out of here? I can pull a p. And what's left? X plus 4. And in the next one, I can pull a 3, and I'm left with x plus 4. And then we can pull out a x plus 4 out of both, and we're left with p plus 3. Does everybody understand that? We're just adding greatest common factor. Adding greatest, I said don't pack up, we're doing one more. Okay, can I erase that? The only thing that was different was this. You should include that positive there. Okay, I got one more to do. Can I move on? Oh, you can ask for it afterwards. All right. On the first one, what's the GCF? What can we pull out? Y squared. And what's left? X squared minus 1. What can I pull out?
9.
What kind of 9?
-1.
-9. And then I end up with, when I divide this by -9, I get a -1. When I divide this by -9, I'm left with a positive x squared. So we end up with x squared minus 1 times the quantity of y squared minus 9. And then we have to break it down. It's x plus 1 times x minus 1. And this is difference of squares of y plus 3 times y minus 3. And that is our final answer. But I'm going to put it up here so that you can see the words. And, I guess they're doing the same thing. And that is our lesson.